What would you do if you were forced to leave the life you now have to start a new one in a country you know very little about? Now imagine having to do that at 11 years old. Tough, right? That's exactly what the author of this book, Learning to Die in Miami, had to endure. And this is the second memoir written by award-winning Connecticut author Carlos Eire. Welcome, Carlos. It's great to have you here with us.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
So you came to this country when you were just 11 years old. It had to be frightening.
It was a little bit frightening, but it was also an adventure because kids tend to see things in a very positive light. So I was thinking of all the wonderful new things that might happen.
But it was an agonizing decision
Yes.
for your parents who were still, we should tell everybody you arrived here from Cuba, but it was agonizing for them because they were still in Cuba at the time. Exactly what was going on then?
What was going on was that the government had taken over everything. It was a totalitarian regime. And the kids were already being taken from their parents in various ways. They were forced to attend these paramilitary exercises, the pioneers. It's like the Boy Scouts, except it's all very much communist indoctrination. Plus, in the summertime, kids in Cuba still to this day have to go to the countryside to work in agricultural camps. So, in essence, slave labor, because they don't get paid for that.
And this was something your parents obviously didn't want you and
Right.
your brother, Tony, who came
Right.
along with you to have to deal with.
Right, and it was intended as a temporary separation. The plan was for us to reunite either here a few months later, the parents would come, or there, because everyone expected the Castro regime to not last very long, but it didn't turn out that way.
As you and your brother were among the 14,000 children that took part in the 1962, now referred to as the Pedro Pan airlift?
Right. It's the Spanish version of Peter Pan, and it was a name given to the airlift by an American journalist. But it's not a name that those of us who came on the airlift ever used.
And there's a sad twist to this story. You were telling me earlier, not everybody got out.
That's right. When the program ended very abruptly in October of 1962 due to the missile crisis, there were 80,000 more children waiting to leave.
How heartbreaking.
So if you add it all up, we're talking about 100,000 children in an island that only had a population of 6 million. That alone tells you how bad things were.
All right, you start this book off with the phrase, having just died.
Yes. It really, later in life, as I looked back to the moment when I left my parents and arrived in the U.S., it really felt like a death, because from that moment forward, as soon as I landed, I had to become a different person. So it was, in essence, a death. I left somebody behind who never, ever, ever surfaced again the same way.
And you were actually reunited with your mother eventually.
3.5 years later,
3.5 years later.
our mom got to come.
But your father?
Father never got to leave. And then he died in 1976 as he was trying to leave. So he never made it.
Did you ever see him again?
Never again, no. The last time I saw him was at the airport in Havana.
That's very sad. So you get here at 11 years old and you're put into a camp.
Right. We were all taken to camps, and the camps were really processing centers. There they sorted us out and sent us somewhere else. The 14,000 kids ended up being sent to 40 different states, to all different kinds of places, from families that would take us in, foster homes, to institutions, boarding schools, or in some cases orphanages.
You were actually lucky because you were placed with some families you knew from Cuba.
Eventually, yes. And my first family in the camp were people I knew from Cuba. And then we were taken in by separate American families in Miami, my brother and I, about 20 blocks apart, and they were a wonderful family. And then we ended up, through a bureaucratic mix-up, ended up in a group home for juvenile delinquents, which was not very nice.
Absolutely not.
And eventually, we were even luckier than most, because an uncle of ours arrived at the very last minute before all flights were cut off. And we went to live with him in Illinois.
Lots of symbolism in this book.
Yes. Yeah.
And in fact, you actually have an out-of-body experience. I think you may have died in this the operating room.
I was having surgery for an injury, and
you were a young boy too at the time.
Oh, I was 21.
Oh, you were 21.
20 or
okay.
21.
Okay.
And yeah, I had the classic near-death experience, going down the tunnel and everything, and seeing my body. And I'm not sure what happened. They never told me anything went wrong, but a couple of doctors have told me that my heart might have stopped during that surgery, and they never told me, because it does happen. They try to hide it from you sometimes.
Now, this is your second memoir. The first one, Waiting for Snow in Havana, was a National Book Award winning book. Why write a second one?
Two reasons. People kept asking me to do it, and more intrinsic reason, the story ends abruptly in the first one, when I get on the plane and come to the U.S. And I've always thought that the second part of that story, how my brother and I dealt with our life here in the U.S. Without parents, I thought that needed to be told, because it has a lot to say about the immigrant experience, not just for people who leave for political reasons, but anyone who moves from one place to another.
It was a tough life for your brother.
Yes, it was, yeah, because he was older. He was older, so he had more responsibility to bear. And also, when you get to be a certain age, 17 or so, you start making important decisions. And if you don't have parents to guide you with those decisions, and you make them on your own, you often make mistakes.
Do you think you would have made the same decision had you been forced to do the same thing for your children?
Oh, I think so. I think so. I thank my parents every day for what they did, because it gave me an opportunity to have a life of my own. The problem in Cuba was that your life is never your own. The government owns you. They try to own your soul and your mind. You can't ever say what's really on your mind. So here, something most Americans take for granted.
That's right. It's the land of the free and home of the brave.
Yes, freedom much more important than the bravery part.
Again, the book is Learning to Die in Miami by Carlos Eire. Where can we get the book, Carlos, really quickly?
Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, or your local bookstore, but more likely online.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And just